Hi guys, my name is Christina and welcome to my channel and welcome to the Weekend Drawing Session podcast. So today I'm actually excited about this episode. It's not the longest one that I have. I have I think 2 that are 1 hour long, but this one is just 40 minutes. But in this episode, I actually go and I draw a very uncomfortable close-up and a lot of details, and I do a lot of anatomical drawing, anatomical, but I'm drawing around the shapes of the characters' faces, so there's a lot of anatomy sculpting going on, so I think it's pretty exciting. So as right off the bat, I'm starting to work on the face of this lady. I actually don't know her name. Interesting. She's present in so many panels and she's an active character, she's doing things, but I don't know her name actually. Oh well, the lady. We'll call her the lady because she's the only lady in the scene, so this is kind of easy. So she is an older, not older, she's 50, 60 years old. She is maybe 40 something, in her early 40s, so she's the older person in the group that I will be drawing. So yeah, so actually I was thinking to use this footage as I was explaining you in some other video how to kind of sculpt with color, because this is kind of what I like doing recently. I realized that if you're using your lines to begin with and then you kind of use the lines as the guide to draw shape and draw anatomy and everything, it doesn't work as well. So the best thing that I find to draw and paint in semi-realistic, fully shaded way is that you have to sculpt the face of your character or anatomy of your character or literally anything folds on the clothes and anything. You have to shape it with color, kind of like how I was doing here with her cheeks and yeah, something like this. So basically you are painting with shadows and light and creating the shape, and this is the fastest way to draw, honestly, and I think this is the one that is very solid and will give your drawings this feeling of confidence and sureness. And yeah, so you see how, for example, now I'm sculpting her temples and side of her face, and then I'm using, and it's another thing that I'm very important to do, is to flip your image always, especially when you're drawing anatomy, especially when you're drawing symmetrical in quote unquote symmetrical things like face, just because faces are actually not symmetrical. They're somewhat symmetrical. They're not exactly symmetrical. However, when we're drawing them, we always have this thing that we're kind of not bias, but it's when we're looking at something from one side, and usually faces never turn to us in the comic situation directly facing us. Usually it's facing us with some angle. So, and we do tend to distort it a little bit. It's something that happens almost all the time, and no matter how long I've been drawing faces and no matter how long I've been drawing certain particular faces, I always do this thing when I distort them in an odd way, and I have to always flip the canvas horizontally, mirror the image horizontally, whichever it is called in the software that you're working on, to just double check that the whole face is not really tilted. And usually what I do, I just use free transform. I just transform the whole face a little bit to help it. And I like to have sessions of drawing on different options. So flip to one side and then flip to another side, then going back, flipping and drawing there a little bit. So my eyes are constantly getting accustomed to the more or less symmetrical version of the face, and the one that you want to achieve is not the one that's exactly symmetrical, but the one that reads and feels symmetrical. It doesn't feel distorted or warped, the eyes are floating elsewhere. And what I mean, for example, every time you're drawing, you want kind of the inner corner of your eye and the outer corner of the eye just to be on parallel lines, the same as you want to have points on your nose and edges of your lips also be on the parallel line. So you want to kind of have this, and if again in real life those lines are not always parallel, but this is kind of have it somewhat parallel is very important. And especially it's very important if you're drawing face that is turned away from you or facing you at some angle, because this is where perspective comes into place. And if you really start to mess it up, things starts getting really funny. So that's why I'm seriously recommending to always flip canvas horizontally, mirror it, and make sure it's working. So yeah, so this is kind of again I'm doing this sculpting with the shades basically. Originally, when I draw character in the scene, like for the first time, when I'm drawing the scene for the first time and I'm drawing this character in color setting for the first time, I'm using directly photo references. But as I already drew the character several times in the scene, I prefer to use my own drawing, because photo always have more colors and more shades than your drawing will end up having. It's just because the way, just how it works. So I like to grab main shades from the drawing that I already created with the colors that I kind of picked already, maybe not so consciously, but the colors that happen to be the colors for those shades. So I like to take main shades from my own drawing, and then I can use the photo to just grab a shade, the very specific one, like something like a like redness for the cheeks, or really, really dark shade to put them in the corner of the lips, something like this, like very specific shade. So yeah, but overall, I really like using shapes that I'm grabbing from my picture that I already drew, just because it creates better consistency. Because if you can imagine, if the photo has so many different shades, and in the drawing I will end up using just part of them, if I just gonna refer to the photo all the time, it definitely will create a very more like artistic and more painterly vibe to my whole comic and the whole scene. But just overall, it takes more time to just pick some colors, because as you pick colors from the photo with like eyedropper, the thing is, you sometimes grabbing pixels that are not as dark as you really want, not exactly that tint that you really want. So it's just better, what I found, it's just grabbing them from the picture that you already drew. But so basically the thing is, it's just I'm grabbing darker shades, brighter shapes, and I keep in mind that where some of them will be the pinkier one, the more the colder one, the more the warm tones, and I just sculpt with this. For example, if I'm using like a darker shade, I'm just drawing certain edges that are in the shadow. If I'm drawing like very dark, it's something that's completely not lit, usually stuff underneath. And this idea of just sculpting, and why it's called sculpting, is just because imagine that you actually have like the actually you're making a sculpture, and you kind of chop away shapes to create whatever you want. Like in this case, I want to create a face of this character. So it's all about thinking, okay, what angle does this kind of shape, like how does this shape look like? And this certain surface, like kind of like you imagining the face is like a complex like combination group of surfaces, and each surface is facing different angle and is lit differently because of the angle that is facing. So this is why I call it sculpting. And for example, the forehead, it's facing up, so it has to be more lit. So I'm kind of imagining that this is a surface facing up. For example, temples, they're darker because they're facing more sideways. And I keep this idea of what the shape actually is, instead of just, looking at references and trying to repeat the colors. I'm actually thinking how the shape develops in space and how this shape is working in this like imaginary space, basically. So this is kind of something that I really recommend you try doing, just because I think it makes your drawing really stronger. And if you just using the reference and you just copying the colors on the reference, and you don't put this thought about the shape in, it's going to be harder for your reader to understand shape. Like it will take a little bit more time to understand, because when you're drawing, so how drawing works, and drawing anatomy or drawing any shape, basically the weaker way of drawing is just copying. And you're like, okay, this is bright color, this is this color, and you're just copying colors that are there and shades that are there in relationships to how they are in like something that you're painting. You're just copying these combinations. So this is a weaker way to do this. The stronger way to do it, and how, for example, in Russia, like you're traditionally taught to do art, you look at the shape, you analyze it, you break it down, and with your art, and you kind of almost explaining the shape. So you already look at the shape, you understand how the shape developing in space, how the shape works, what type of shape it is. And then when you're drawing not just copying, you're using also your comprehension, and it's almost like a combination of you looking at what you're drawing, and then but at the same time, as you're putting it on paper, you put your thought into there as well. There's a lot of collaborative work. So sometimes it's not actually copying. Sometimes you will emphasize certain hue. Sometimes you make certain shade darker. Sometimes you make certain shape brighter. So it's that kind of, because your drawing is just your observation of the shape and your analysis of the shape, and it's your understanding of the shape. So it kind of like not necessarily just copying. It's like a super copying, not like super copying. It's like copying with annotation almost. It's like if it helps your reader better understand what type of shape it is. So if you have like do certain actions to make this easier for the reader to understand, you will take those actions even if they jeopardize a little bit of a like copying vibe. So yeah, and that's kind of something that I always keep in mind, especially in something like this where I'm drawing something that doesn't exist. So I'm drawing characters. I'm not drawing something that people saw before. I'm drawing characters that I came up with in the environment that I came up with, in the situations that I came up with lightning situations that I came up with. That's why, and it's very important because also my drawings are not just there to just people to look at. It's a storytelling tool. I am creating a comic, so my drawings, they do tell the story just as well as dialogue and actual words tell the story. That's why it's very important for me, so my drawings are coherent. And that reader looks at my picture and it doesn't take them a lot of the time to understand what is going on. They know what is going on. They understand exactly what's going on, where the character's hand is, where's the character chick is exactly, where's it, like where they're turning. So that's why I really like this idea of sculpting like shape. And as you see, I do it in everything. I do it when I'm doing clothes. I'm thinking, okay, like for example, this shoulder, this area is looking up, it's gonna be hit by the light the most, and then those folds, and I'm really going and emphasizing how folds are because we don't see this character hand, we only see the edge of his shoulder, but for me drawing certain folds, it helps to give idea where armpit is, how do the bones are working underneath, like how does this, even though the shoulder we're looking from the side, I'm trying to create understanding how far it is, like how wide it is and everything. So this is kind of like how I personally like to draw and how I personally think it is very important to draw when you're creating something like a comic where drawing is a part of storytelling. And overall, I think it just created just a stronger drawing, because also if you're drawing like this, you're putting a lot of thought into this. And even, for example, if you don't copy something exactly, if, for example, your job is to copy, or even if you don't have an exact reference, or even if you're drawing, for example, anatomy for a monster that you just came up with and you never seen this monster, let's say, like ever, like nothing like this you've ever seen before, you still are able to draw it so realistically and so it looks like it's working. So this monster looks like you can see how it can walk, how it can jump, how it can move and attack, and what it can do. So it looks realistic, anatomy looks realistic, and you had nothing to get it from, like you didn't have any reference, you have to come up. But the thing is, because you were using this like thoughtful drawing, when you were thinking how the shape works, how the shape connects to another shape, all of that actually makes your drawing understandable for people. So I'm actually thinking to make the whole video about this technique, but I'm not really sure how to. I can, as you can see, I'm trying to explain it the best to my ability, but if I want to create something like this, I want to again create something like a course, because it's not just one lecture sort of thing. I have to show how it works in different combinations, but we shall see what we're gonna do with this channel about like art lessons, so we'll see. But yeah, so this is, I feel like, and this is also to me very relaxing, because it's like I feel satisfied while I'm creating this structure, and also understanding the structure again is, for example, very helpful for me. I'm drawing this ear, and this ear, it's a complicated shape, and it's the way I draw this ear and the way how good I understand how the shape of this ear works from this particular angle will help me to communicate to you, the reader, where does this guy looking, how he's moving his ears, where is he paying attention to, and overall transmit to you the vibe of this panel, and transmit to you information that I can. And this, I think, is very valuable. And yeah, basically use all of your tools every time that you're drawing. Try to draw this way to help your reader understand what did you draw. And especially if you're drawing in the style something like mine, I also feel like there is a lot of pressure because my style is more photoreal, and if the style is more cartoony, so this is very, it's pretty easy to understand if you're drawing like a t-shirt, hand, hair. I'd say it's pretty easy to understand things when it's still in that style, but if my style is more photorealistic, I have this kind of like pressure to make sure, even though I draw things photorealistic, they still have this clarity and not necessarily simplification and stylization of something that, for example, cartoon style would have, but it will still has this way of really explaining what is being drawn. So basically you can see me implementing this theory and my deep artistic belief in everything I draw. At this point, for example, as I'm drawing just the jacket of this lady, I keep thinking about every fold as if it is a shape, and each shape, the how it like where our surfaces are, and how can I sculpt it, over sculpt it, like sculpt it extra. Well, given I'm not for my comic, I'm not specifically drawing in realistic style. I'm drawing in more of it's like still stylized style. Like there's no way. It's not really stylistic. It's very detailed, shaded, closer to a realistic style, but still not. If I would be drawing like just a painting, just a standalone, this is not exactly how I would be drawing it. I would draw it in more details. Like here you can see I'm really relying on like a contour lines, and by contour I don't mean makeup, I mean actually those lines that you see me like emphasizing on the edge of the character. For me, I found out that this technique actually helps me a lot, because in realistic kind of world setting you wouldn't get edges that's like edge between the object and the, like, you know, area and space around it. It's more of a psychological understanding than visual. If you look around, you see there's a lot of colors going on, a lot of things going on. So something like the edge between the, for example, a person and their background is not something that we read immediately, objectively, just looking at the visuals, not something that is the most noticeable thing. But we know as people, when we're looking at things, we know the edge of the object or person. So for us, we keep it in mind. We understand in our mind, put a lot of emphasis to the edge. So for example, in the comic, I do emphasize it quite a lot. It's my like style that I choose, just because it helps, I think, to separate the character from the background, since everything is so very detailedly shaded. Wow, English died just now. But yeah, so this is kind of something that I like to emphasize, like the edge of the character. You will see me do it in many more episodes. This is something that I really do like doing. So, and now we're going to move on to this close-up. This is uncomfortable close-up, I call it. And I call it uncomfortable close-up because it's meant to be. So I wanted to close up to this character. So basically what happens, they kind of low-key threatening the main character, not like actively threatening, like, oh, you do this, I'm gonna kill you, but it's more like slowly he realizes the situation that he is currently in, and the situation is basically where they kind of make him do something that he doesn't necessarily want to do. Like he just kind of got involved with this group of people for one reason, and they actually kind of want to set him up to work for them. And yeah, they're gonna make it there's no real choice, except like if he doesn't work with them, he's kind of in danger, not from them, but like from the situation that he's currently in. So basically this whole scene, it's not like direct threat, but this is implied threat. So, and this guy who like I'm currently drawing, so his point, he's like this kind of interesting character. I started him as a completely episodic character, but he graduated to not the main cast, but kind of like more recurring character, because I just feel like his personality is really interesting, and I like how it plays off Kuroi's personality. So the point with this character is that he acts a little goofy, he acts like a little jokingly, so but his jokes are kind of so oddly on point with like a threat that he's making, so it's hard to tell either he's being a little dumb and not serious, or he's being way smarter than that you want him to be, and he's making all of this kind of threats and things with all this jokey way. It's hard to actually face him and say like face him on what he's saying and what he's doing, because everything is kind of like aloof and seemingly to be a joke, but he still like makes this threats and communicates this idea. Basically, I just like how this character works, and he basically at this page he's kind of delivering kind of at the point of what is happening to the main character. And you see in the previous panel he's kind of lifting his arm, and on this panel he kind of puts his arm on this guy's shoulder and kind of tells him what they're expecting from him here. And I wanted to make this panel a really close up. So it is almost uncomfortable for us as the reader to be this close to this guy. And this is the vibe of like closeness that I wanted to communicate. So if it's close, it's kind of like uncomfortable for us to be this close. This is kind of how Croy feels in this situation, where he kind of feels like it dawns on him what is happening, and also this guy is delivering this kind of this close is kind of the vibe that Croy is kind of in the grasp type of thing, like just kind of that's the feeling that I wanted to communicate, and that's why I wanted to do this close-up. But also the fact that I'm doing this close-up is actually gives me a lot of opportunity just to have fun and have this close-up of the face and really enjoy drawing through the skin, like drawing through the eyes, drawing through everything. And this is something that I really like. And it's just and sometimes, you know, close-ups is not about like drawing details such as pores. It's about just adding complexity to the shape. You can see how on the reference on the side I have this guy's face already drawn, and then on the page on the panel that I'm currently working on, as I'm drawing it, I'm not changing things that I'm drawing. I'm not adding pores, pimples, I don't know, facial hairs, I don't know, nose hairs, I don't know, blackheads, I don't know. I'm not adding any of this. What I'm doing is just adding complexity to the shape. So for example, if he has this main shape of his cheek, I'm adding more complexity to this cheek face. I'm adding more complexity to this cheek shape, and I'm adding more interesting like transition from the side of this cheek to the top of this cheek, then to the temple and stuff like this, and even like this like kind of his lower lid, like under a bag type of thing. I'm still drawing the very same thing as I have like on this page that I have on the left, but I'm adding more details to the shape necessary. Like I'm just breaking it down more in more details to make it just more complex, but overall I'm drawing the same thing. And I think that's kind of important to keep in mind, just because this is a mistake that I used to do before. When I would do close-up, I would really go and like drawing like a little facial hair on the forehead type of thing. I was like thinking microscope type of thing, but I shouldn't think. This is not helping anybody. It doesn't really help. It's not like the point of close-up. The point of close-up is just not see all these unnecessary details about your character's face. It's more like just feel that the character is close, and for that you just the way how to oppress the drawing when it's close up is just add complexity to the shape, add more breakups to the shadow and light, add more transition between certain shapes, and that's literally all you need. And also like use, obviously, because like the scale to brush strokes, like the scale of a brush stroke to this particular drawing should be obviously different. Like the brush strokes should be smaller to his face on the panel that I'm currently working. Oh yeah, I needed to make him smile a little bit more. So it's like it has kind of feels like it has more details, because overall the amount of brush strokes on this face is smaller, so that bigger, the amount is bigger and brush strokes are smaller, so it looks like the texture is more dense. So this is really what you need. You don't need to get in more details. I used to draw it and it just looks weird, and it doesn't really do the job and do the purpose. It doesn't communicate this like feeling of closeness. That's kind of what close-ups do, and they do communicate this for different reasons. There's different reasons you want to use close-ups. In this case, I wanted to be like uncomfortable, kind of weird, like don't get off me type of thing. Like, why this guy is so close? Why this guy is so close and smiling in such a weird way? No. So yeah, so this is basically what I'm trying to do. But this is again about the sculpting thing. See, I'm just sculpting away. To me, it's just so. It's like almost like organizing something. This is how I feel about this. It's like when you put all your shapes that you're using in right positions and right order, and they're all working really nice. This is just a satisfaction that I have. And I also am having fun with this particular angle, because he's like leaning in, his face is closer to us than his shoulders, and he is like, the way we see his neck and his shoulders is almost like we're looking at this from above, but his face we're looking from the front. And it's just a little bit, not like challenging, but I would say it's not, a beginner style kind of angle, because we have the face tilted a little bit. Like every time you have to draw a nose to this way that you don't see the nostrils, that is a little bit from above, I feel like, okay, this is not like basic and a beginner one. It's a more like intermediate level of face. Like so that's this one particularly wasn't a challenge, and sometimes some of them are challenging to me. Sometimes I find like with those angles it's harder to communicate emotions just because the face is kind of weirdly turned towards the reader. That's why emotions are harder to read. And therefore it's harder to draw because it's harder to draw them the way that they're readable. But in this case, the motion really fits it because the angle itself communicates the vibe just as well. This is kind of something that interesting that good to keep in mind, that sometimes the proper angle, the proper like a camera shot type of thing can already communicate a lot of things about your character and a lot of things about the situation, so that you don't have to squeeze as much from your character's facial expression, because you can get it from the vibe and how this character is positioned. And also another thing to keep in mind, you don't always need two eyes of the character to communicate emotions. Sometimes one eye will actually do a better job than two eyes, because one eye kind of feels like you character is hiding something that you don't know about the character, maybe intention. So because eyes, you know, they're called that we see kind of soul of a person looking through their eyes. So I feel like overall it's a good technique in comic to, for example, not show character eyes or not show character eyes well. If we want to kind of hide the agenda of the character, or in this particular case, if we just hide one eye and have one eye visible, it kind of creates also this kind of feeling of unease. Is like, oh, I'm not getting the whole picture from this character, I'm not getting everything that he feels, I'm not really kind of seeing and feeling this character, like he's hiding something on this panel, something I don't get to see. So this is, I think it's a overall good thing to play around with. And yeah, I think like for this panel it really kind of works, because yeah, he has this sneaky face, he has this eye that is like his mouth is smiling, his eye is not necessarily happily smiling, but it has those folds underneath it that kind of like somewhat like smirking. I don't know, like just I wanted to make his emotion like a little bit more complex. It's kind of, he's still a character and he's like smiling and looking kind of friendly, kind of goofy, kind of like annoying kind of guy, but with what he's saying, it kind of actually is a threat. And also one of his eyes hidden, and it's kind of implies that you might not know everything you need to know about this character. And so this is something that I like to do. And actually with this particular one, I don't know if you're gonna see it in this particular recording, if I did it over the weekend, but I'm gonna flip him horizontally as well. And actually this particular one actually turned out to be not so bad when flipped out. I don't think I had to change a lot or anything. So that's what magic of when you draw with just one eye. It's really hard to mess it up if you just have one eye and one eyebrow to draw. Like nose is pretty easy to draw, but yeah, eyebrow at least, and an eye, if you have just one, it's easier to keep it simple. But yeah, and again, like I'm really going very hard on sculpting his how do you call it, his collar, just because the angle to which his collar is facing us is unusual, and I wanted to really be clear what is going on. So I'm making the edge of this collar is really dark, and yeah, really emphasizing it. And at this point, maybe even the light would not be falling specifically this way, because he's kind of bending, so the light originally, like usually how I draw him, falls on like the tops of his shoulder, but now that he's leaning, it's probably will make sense for the light to fall on his back. But I still keep it kind of like the light still on the top of his shoulders, just so for reader it's easier to understand the pose. I'd rather go with this type of consistency that's not physically accurate than with physical accuracy, just because again coherence is very important, and just making sure people get what is going on. And again, the thing about the ears with chondra ears, because he's not his like just his, but he's of a chondra of this race, they're very helpful because they're so big and protruding. They're standing like they're pointing sideways, and they're really helping because their shape is so predominant. They're really helping to communicate the angle which face is. They kind of help to, you know, add information and help you to orient the face or the head in the space. Just if you position the ears correctly, they already communicate a lot about the pose. and I'm just noticing I had this stroke that is not finished and it's annoying me. Am I gonna fix it in this recording because it's annoying? What is this line? Why did I do that? You know, sometimes those things occur when accidentally press shift and did a stroke. It, like in Photoshop, it creates the straight line. So it's like you click, then you press shift and you click somewhere else on the screen, and it creates like a straight line between them. This is like the thing. Sometimes it happens, and I'm really not happy with this line. It's kind of a little bit annoying me, but that's okay. Yeah. So, and now now I'm trying to kind of get his hair to work. And this is another thing. Oh, thank God I fixed that line. Jesus Christ, it was bothering me. Yeah, good. I'm sculpting his ear. I'm finishing doing that. Oh gosh, yeah, that panel was overall so so pleasant to draw. I really enjoyed it, just because it's really rare when I get to draw these crazy close-ups, and usually I do them for portraits, for example, when I draw like a separate drawings. But this is not something that I do very often because I'd rather spend my time drawing my comic. Actually, a couple words on the teeth as I'm drawing them. What I realized when drawing teeth, especially something for comic, when you're not going for crazy photorealism, is that to draw just the edges of the teeth, and then if, for example, the mouth is open too wide, just draw the gums, and don't draw separation between the teeth overall, like those lines and shadows between individual teeth, because then the drawings start becoming creepy. Just imply, like, brain and imagination of somebody who is watching will kind of complete the image of the teeth in their mind. But if you actually draw those lines, the way it's just kind of looks creepy and looks a little weird. So I noticed that, I don't know, I noticed that it looks just better when you draw teeth this particular way. I don't know, just a weird tip. Or maybe we should do a video of drawing teeth. Every time I'm doing this podcast, when I'm just talking over what I'm drawing, I'm thinking, oh, I should do a video about telling how I do this, like a dedicated video. And I have like a lot of ideas of what I should do. But yeah, another thing that I want to do a whole dedicated video about is hands. And especially like fingers and the wrists and how this works, because this shape is really complex. It's probably the most complex part of human body, either after the face or with the face. Like, I don't know, it really depends. They're both extremely complex, because if you think fingers, they have like, there's so many bones, so many joints. This is a very complex situation, and to draw them in right proportions, you really need to be familiar with you have to really draw a lot of hands, basically, in a lot of different poses, and really study the anatomy of the hands. What I like doing sometimes, I really like, if, for example, my hand is like just hanging from somewhere, and I see like the veins go up and become like puffy and whatnot, I like literally put my hands in different poses and investigate. Or if I get, I don't know, if I'm really familiar with someone like a Florent, or I don't know, I like to just play with their hands and just fold it, unfold, and see how different hands work with. And yeah, basically, if I'm allowed to touch someone's hands under any circumstances, I'm doing it mostly for artistic purposes rather than dramatic purposes, because this is how obsessed I am with my craft. I just like see how those joints really works on different people, because especially like knuckles, they're pretty complex, especially if you are just having something like this pose that I'm currently drawing, is that his hand is kind of not in the fist, not super relaxed, it's just kind of hanging and just lying down or resting on this guy's shoulder. It seems like this is kind of this thing that when you draw it right, when you finish drawing it, it's drawn, it does look effortless. It does look like, yeah, sure, it's a hand, like what else did you expect? But it's not easy to draw at all. Another thing with nails, yeah, I changed my mind. I wanted to draw a nail one way and I decided not to do it. But nails are also interesting thing, just kind of like the same as the teeth. This is another thing that you shouldn't be drawing very photorealistic, even if your style is very close to photorealism, because this is another thing that if you draw too realistic with, how nails are with all the cuticles, and if you look inside of the nail, like they have this white area that doesn't touch the skin, and then you have this kind of like a pinky not like half sphere, like a half of a disc that is close to cuticle, to the base of the nail, like that is darker pink, then you have a lighter pink, and like there is a lot of stuff going on. Just the thing with nails, try not to, I would not recommend to draw him like super realistic, just because it's not the thing. Like teeth, when you draw it super realistic, it looks weird, because actually I don't have the answer why. I don't have the answer to the continuation to my, because it's just, I don't know, something with something like nails, teeth. If you draw it too hard and draw it too realistic, it kind of looks creepy. And so, yeah, maybe not. I don't know. So just when you're drawing hands, I would say focus more of your attention and more of your like a contrast punch on knuckles. Overall, when you're drawing something like complex shape, put most of your work and most emphasis with the drawing, kind of like what I was talking in the beginning of the video, kind of like your thought process of how it works in the areas that are the most important to communicate. Like in the hand, it would be knuckles. In the face, it would be eyes, it would be cheeks, it would be nose, it would be mouth. Like this is kind of where most of your brush strokes should be, more of the contrasty elements should be, more the emphasis of the shape should be, rather than on elements like teeth or nails, because when you're drawing, you want to bring awareness to things that are the most important to understand and the most important to get. And yeah, and this is kind of like something that I noticed, and especially it is noticeable when you like, I cannot do it too hard in the style like mine, but if you're drawing like, for example, with a pencil, or you're drawing like just without colors, like black and white, this is where, when you have like, for example, complete shades in between, this is where this is very important to emphasize something like this, because with the color, I'm controlled by color a little bit. I cannot really go and do something super dark or super contrasty, because with color it would just not look super realistic. But yeah, well, it's also very helpful. I like to make my layers visible and invisible, like turn it on and off invisibility, just to see kind of, first of all, reassurance how well I done, like just for satisfactory reason, just looking like, yeah, I did do some job, look at this, it's like off and on, great. When it's on, it looks way better. But also good to understand sometimes when you start drawing something and sometimes you go in the wrong direction, you're drawing it certain way, and then when you turn on and turn off the layer, you're like, you know what, even though the previous layer had less details, somehow it looks better. So it's also good thing. So for me, how I like using layers is more like a incremental save, or yeah, just basically like saving a version. This is how I like using a layer. And if I feel like next version is really good, I collapse the layer down, merge with the previous layer. But if not, no. So yeah, again, back to the nail. I like to keep the nails really monochromatic, kind of like showing that, yeah, you guys, I know how nails look like. I know how the shape of the nails, but I'm not going to draw it really specifically. So yeah, this is kind of how I like approaching my nail situation. And yeah, so basically this hand is pretty much finished at this point. I think all I need to do is to like just like make his hair better a little bit. And another thing, the only thing I was missing, I remember I was a little bit stuck with this particular panel just because I didn't have a background for it. You can see the background has like a very weird strokes. I'm kind of like using temporary background. And the thing that is kind of like I had to draw a completely separate background. Like at this point you see me finishing it. Unfortunately, I'm cheating. I'm not including me drawing this background here. I'm saving it for Patreon. Yeah, so basically I had to complete the background and then I added it. And because it's a close-up, what I like to doing this photorealistic thing when I'm using lens blur or kind of like defocus on the backgrounds when the close-up, usually how camera would work. If you have something really close up, something in the background will be really, really defocused. So yeah, in Photoshop, it's a filter. It's under filters, blur, lens blur, and you can set it up. So yeah, and this is kind of how I showed you before. I like to just replace the background and then bring background back and just paint it, like make it the mask black and then paint with with white on this black. I can't speak anymore. I've been talking for so long. And to paint with white on this black mask. And yeah, that almost completed this this panel. I'm so proud of myself. I'm really proud of this panel. But yeah, this also concludes this episode of the podcast. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in, and I will see you in my next episode. Keep drawing.